Oh yeah, I'm quite curious about this. And this comes to us to Aleko, who we already wish a happy birthday to. You're the best, Aleko. Thank you so much for being here. Yes. From Jumanji, the 1995 film, Origin of the Board and its Dark Secret. Gosh, do y'all remember this movie? Yeah. It was such a fun movie. I absolutely loved it. Absolute insanity, kind of scary sometimes, but oh yeah, it's really good. I love this film too. Here we are. Let's see what happens here. Three, two, one, go.
Strange name for a game. Or is it even a game at all? After watching the 1995 movie Jumanji, many questions remain unanswered. Why was the ending of the film changed? Why was the scene with Judy and Peter's memories deleted? Who created
There was a different ending? I didn't know that. Oh yeah, Jumanji is pretty huge over here too. Like a beloved cult classic for many of our childhood. It's a really great film. I don't know if it's had much of like a I don't know how big its cultural impact was, but it's a really great film. Oh, thank you for aging us by 500 years. I'm turning to dust as we speak, Pikachu's. But yeah, we watched it on VHS way back in the day, way back in the day. Yeah, it's an old film, but a great one.
the board? Why can only children hear the sound of the drums? Is it possible to die while playing? What exactly happened in 1869? Why did Caleb and Benjamin Sproul hide Jumanji by burying it underground? Couldn't they just burn the game? Or maybe it can't be destroyed at all? That's far too many questions
Question, why
for
did they
just
try
one
burning
movie.
it?
In Jumanji, there's only the rule of the game, while the entire backstory of the board itself was left off screen. I think it's time to fix that. My name is Evgeny, and this is our breakdown of the 1995 film Jumanji. I promise it's going to be interesting. Let's begin. Hello guys, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who supported the video The Ninth Gate. It's gotten an incredible number of views, and I'm truly thrilled that so many of you enjoyed it. A special thanks to everyone who's been sending donations and joining as channel members. Honestly, I
Definitely a
didn't
childhood
expect so many
favorite.
people to
Yeah.
respond. Even a single dollar might not seem like much, but for me as a creator, it's a huge motivation, and it means the world. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Which movie would you like me to break down next? Drop your suggestions in the comments. I read them all and will keep working hard to surprise you with new stories. Thank you so much for being here with me. So, I think we should start with the origin story of Jumanji. The game was created in 1868 on the African continent in Sierra Leone. At first, Jumanji had nothing to do with magic or any supernatural forces. It was an ordinary board game crafted by a loving father for his children. The chief of a local tribe, Alkali, using mahogany wood and all his skill, brought a child's idea to life. The folding board was decorated with natural dyes traditionally used by African artisans of that time. On the outer surface, it featured delicate carvings. At the center, there was an image of dense jungle and a mysterious city filled.
Yeah, all that is made by hand. I mean, even for a movie prop, it's absolutely gorgeous, isn't it? Oh, so this video was originally Russian and someone translated it? Yeah, hopefully they got permission for it, right? Yeah, it's pretty good. Well, it's good that we can enjoy it in English either way, so that this American audience here can watch it. Is it on auto dub? I don't think so. Oh no, it's in original English. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's an official translation of the original Russian video, which is pretty cool. Okay then, let's keep going. See what's going on. What's all about?
With gold. Along the edges were animals, a monkey, an elephant, a rhinoceros, and an eagle. Inside the board were dice, riddle cards, and 4 playing pieces. Each token was made from a unique material. The elephant from blackwood, the rhino from ivory, the monkey from green quartz, and the crocodile from malachite. The maximum number of players was 4, the father, the mother, and their 2 sons. This way, the whole family could take turns rolling the dice and solving the riddles written on the cards. In total, there were 126 cards, each containing its own riddle. To win the game, a player had to give the correct answer to the riddle. Only then would their token be able to travel the dangerous path through the jungle, at the center of which stood a mythical city made entirely of gold. On the board, this city was represented by a golden plate. In the first version of Jumanji, there was no iconic green stone with the glowing text, and there were no inscriptions in English. All of that appeared later, after British soldiers arrived in the village. You see, since 1808, Sierra Leone had been an official British colony. The local people often suffered from looting raids carried out by the soldiers. and the village where the game was born was no exception. In 1868, the settlement where Jumanji was created was attacked by troops led by a ruthless officer named Van Pelt. During the raid, most of the villagers were killed. The children, the women, and all the valuables were stolen. The gems, the gold, even the golden plate from the board itself. All of this happened before the eyes of the game's creator, the chief, Alkali. Desperate and realizing that nothing could save his family, Alkali decided to take a drastic step. He turned to an ancient sorcery known as the Ankuba ritual, a dark practice that allowed a soul to be bound to an object. The chief grabbed a handful of the riddle cards and threw them into the fire. In that very moment, from the flames, the Jumanji we know today was born. Everyone who was nearby was pulled into the game, both the villagers and the British soldiers. Their souls became eternal prisoners of the board's world. At the center of the playing field,
it's just from the new Jumanji movie. Oh, okay. The only Jumanji film I've seen is the original one, so this all kind of shocked me. I'm like, what do you mean? Okay.
Appeared the green stone known as Nyamakora, the heart of Jumanji. Within it, Alkali and his family were able to reunite, preserving their lives, even if it was in a different, otherworldly dimension. That was how the board gained its power. It became not just a game, but an eternal prison. A trial for anyone brave or foolish enough to roll the dice. Later, a young missionary named Robert Sproul arrived in the village. He noticed that at the site where the settlement once stood, there was nothing left except for one strange object. Robert brought the discovery to Mike, his friend and partner in their research mission. He told him that the village they had been studying had mysteriously vanished, and all he could find there was this wooden board. Mike decided to examine the object, and without realizing it, the two friends began the game. But luck was not on their side. The missionaries drew some of the most dangerous challenges, the supreme beast of the jungle and the poisonous vine. In their battle with the supernatural forces, Robert and Mike were killed, becoming the very first victims of Jumanji. A year later, in 1869, a package arrived from Africa to the American town of Brantford, New Hampshire. It contained the personal belongings of Robert Sproul, his two sons, Caleb and Benjamin.
They just sent the cursed board game along with the dude's body as part of his personal belonging? Well, I guess they had no way of knowing that the board game was responsible for it, but that's a big whoops, right? Wow, so that is quite a dark origin so far. That it was cursed to try and protect the family? It was never meant to be found by people after that, but then it did.
Unaware of the dark secret behind their father's possessions, immediately began unpacking the trunk. Of course, the strange wooden board caught their attention. After reading the rules, Caleb and Benjamin, together with their mother Lisa, decided to play. With each new roll of the dice, things grew worse and worse. Before their very eyes, monstrous creatures began to break through from the game into the real world. Wild animals, giant spiders, and deadly carnivorous plants. The last to appear was the hunter, Van Pelt. To the family's horror, in his face they recognized Robert Sproul, their father and husband, but he no longer remembered who he once was. Jumanji had consumed his soul and turned him into one of its challenges.
So Van Pelt is like, because I remember in the original Jumanji film, Van Pelt took the form of Robin Williams' father, right? So that's what the board does. The original Van Pelt died inside the board, and now he'll become a cursed spirit of, I guess, someone who matters to you. Wow, this board is not messing around. You're gonna face your demons and then some. Yeah, wow, yeah. This goes way beyond what I was imagining for an origin. Yeah, this is some like horror film thriller stuff, isn't it? Yeah, this curse goes deep. I guess that that does make sense because the original Van Pelt, he would be terrifying. This dude storming your village and he like took out your whole family. It kind of makes sense that he would manifest as your worst fear, but anybody would fear that, right? And then a little kid fearing his stern father. If this other kid also feared his father, that seems to be a common thread, isn't it? The curse is pretty apt in that, isn't it?
At one point, Caleb tried to destroy the board, but soon discovered it was impossible. The cursed game was immune to any physical damage. In the end, the younger brother Benjamin was lucky enough to reach the finish line by saying just one word, Jumanji. The family's torment came to an immediate end. Everything was reset to the starting point, back to the moment when Benjamin and Caleb first discovered the game. After all they had been through, the brothers decided to free themselves from the curse. They hid the board inside a trunk, took it deep into the forest at night, and buried it as far down as they could. And as for what happened next, well, you already know that part of the story. So what does this whole backstory give us? First of all, we now know who created the game, how it traveled to America, how the board gained its magical powers, and more. But there are still lingering mysteries. Is it even possible to destroy Jumanji? Why can only children hear that strange sound of the drums? How many challenges exist in the game in total? And most importantly, is it possible to die inside Jumanji? Let's start with the simplest question, the rule.
Yeah, my goodness gravy. Yeah, okay. So imagine that. They tried to hide it away, but it got found anyway. You know, as for why only children hear it, isn't it like sort of like a common folklore thing that children are more in tune to magic because they're more innocent, you know? Yeah, they say that as you get older and lose your innocence, you like, you know, lose your connection to magic and the spiritual. Yeah, yes, yeah, exactly. Wolf the same wavelength. Oh, wow. Pikachu's is another good point, yeah. It's the original Jumanji. It was a board game a father made for his children. It makes sense that it would call out the children, you know, children, come aside, it's time to play, right? That's also why children would hear it. It's like hearing their parents calling them. Yeah, this is a huge backstory for what was essentially a dark comedy film. But it's cool. It's good for discussion and talking, yeah? Or a darker interpretation. It needs souls to sustain itself. Yeah, but it doesn't need jaded adult souls. It needs the pure souls of children. Oh man, that is pretty scary indeed. Wow.
And the sound of the drums. And as you already know, it can be heard only by children. There's a reason for that. It's how the game lures in new players. Jumanji was originally created for children, for the two sons of a loving father. That's why only
is that just what we said? We were spot on. Yeah, that makes sense. You know, I don't think it was meant to be evil. Just, you know, a mischievous, silly little thing.
only kids can hear the sound of the drums. In Africa, drums were often used as a way to communicate between villages. Their sound could carry for many miles. One village could use them to send a message to another. For example, to announce a tragedy like the death of a chief, or on the contrary, to celebrate joyful news, such as the birth of a long-awaited child. But this particular rhythm was often used in rituals. Its relentless, pulsing beat was believed to open a doorway to another world.
Oh.
In our case, it serves to draw new players in. On top of that, the board itself is able to sense when a child is nearby. You
Okay, yeah. Drums as a way of communicating also makes sense. Yeah, I know there are many African tribes that use drums to communicate. There are some native Alaskan tribes that do the same. Yeah, we have our own drum and dance kind of ceremony thing as a way to communicate good news, bad news, and things like that. Yeah, it seems to be a cultural thing with drums. I guess because it's a good way to get your attention. For a more wholesome theory, the game saw as a lynch point to helping the whole town. He was afraid, so the board game taught him not to be afraid, so he could survive. Nothing will scare him. You know, that's also a pretty good theory too. Yeah, the board as a benevolent force, even if it kind of goes about the wrong way, right? Like maybe you don't need to summon giant mosquitoes or a stampede to drive people to motivate them, right? Oh no, don't worry, Aleko, don't worry. Yeah, it's good to theorize and discuss. You know, it's a huge part. It's a huge part of these commentaries. You know, we can't just watch, right? I'm learning to try and engage more too, because it's important to provide your own commentary and to build a discussion with your chat. So yeah, yeah, no worries, Aleko. It's good. It wasn't. I don't think it was a spoiler. It was just a good correct guess on our part. And yeah, you're right, because because the boy was able to repair his relationship with his father, and then build up his life better from there. He also fixed the shoe factory, right? So the guy was able to continue working at the factory instead of being fired and becoming a cop, right? He was able to fix that guy's life too, and in a way also fix the life of the original of the kids, so that the parents wouldn't pass away in avalanche, right? It's a pretty big roundabout way of improving things, isn't it?
could say that Jumanji has a consciousness of its own, though nothing like a human one. The board was created with a single purpose: to be played. When the green stone, Nyamakora, appeared at the center of Jumanji, the game absorbed not only the souls of people, but also the very rules that were once written on the cards. On the very first card were written the core laws of the game, the very essence of Jumanji, the main rule. You must play until the end, no matter what it costs. This phrase was carved right onto the folding doors of the board, and everything was written in English. There's nothing surprising about that. Sierra Leone was a British colony, and starting from 1808, schools were built there where English was taught. Most of the local population continued to speak their native languages, Mende, Temne, Loco, Limba, and others. But when it came to reading and writing, they used English.
That also makes sense. I've heard about that. And typically in these colonies where they taught the locals to speak English, from what I heard, it was usually the kids that would pick up English a lot quicker than their parents would. So it does make sense that the guy, even though the African chief made this game, he wrote down the rules in English because his kids will grow up speaking English more than their own native language because of the colonies and the schools there, right? And if he wanted his kids to understand the game, in a way, it helps them to leave it in English so that they learn. And the riddles also being in English too. It's also a great way to learn because riddles, in English you can speak in riddles, but sometimes the meaning won't always be literal. So it's a good way to learn the nuances of the English language too, right? I think it's a pretty good interpretation of that, right? Because some people will think, oh, if it's made in Africa, weren't the rules written in African? But then you remember, oh right, because this place used to be a British colony. Yeah, and it's also true, and it's the game ever leaves. In most cases, most people can speak English wherever you go, right? It's not the official language of the world, and I don't think it's the most spoken language. I think it's closer to like Mandarin and Spanish was what I last heard, or the most commonly spoken languages. But English is up there, so yeah, it does make sense in a way. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's a father was thinking ahead there.
That's why the rules and the challenges of the game ended up written in that language. As for the challenges themselves, most of them came directly from the original cards, meaning there were around 126 in total. But for obvious reasons, the movie showed us only 13 of them, which is about 12% of the full list. I won't go through all of them here, but as you might guess, they mostly included Africa's most dangerous animals, snakes, scorpions, giant eagles, hyenas, and more. They were complemented by natural disasters and
And there's 13 of them. Same for the Death Note. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, only showing 13 in the film makes sense, because 13 is an unlucky number.
Catastrophic events, sandstorms, volcanic eruptions, tornadoes, droughts, and even swarms of locusts. There are also a couple of interesting challenges. For example, one where a player's piece is sent all the way back to the starting point, or another where the player's next turn is skipped and passed on to the opponent. But there is one challenge that appeared only after Jumanji gained its supernatural power. Of course, I'm talking about the hunter, Van Pelt. He always appears in the form of a strict father figure, even if dressed in an old-fashioned hunter's outfit that looks absurd by today's standards. Here, it's important to highlight one of Jumanji's most unique abilities. The game uses the player's imagination to materialize its challenges. Remember, the board was originally created to bring a family together. In that sense, there are no true rivals in the game. If one player reaches the finish, everyone wins. The earlier challenges described on the original cards were shaped to stimulate the player's imagination.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Because, as a parent, you do want your child to have a good imagination. That's the purpose of these early board games and stuff, to try and spur your child into thinking a bit. It's something that I don't think it's something many parents do nowadays. If these, horror story TikToks I hear about children in school nowadays are, you should be trying to get your child motivated to think. So good on the father in that case.
In this case, the children's. For example, the mischievous monkeys who drive cars and motorcycles, cause chaos, and wreck everything around them. That was purely a product of Peter's imagination. In the boy's mind, that's how monkeys behave, and so his imagination shaped their appearance in the real world. As you've probably realized, no such species exists in the wild, which is why they look like something halfway between a chimpanzee and a capuchin. That's exactly how Peter pictured the monkeys in his mind, and this principle applies to all of the challenges, including the hunter, Van Pelt. Samuel Parrish was a very strict father, constantly displeased with Alan's behavior. In his eyes, Alan should have already been capable of solving his own problems at that age, instead of running away from them.
If you're afraid of something, you've got to stand and face it.
Parrish Sr. believed his son lacked courage, and that sending him to
Yeah.
Cliffside School for Boys would help fix that.
Yeah, honestly, the father actually wasn't too wrong though, was he? Sure, he was a bit strict and maybe a bit mean about it, but was he wrong? Not really. A metaphor for a family or for a corporate group. If one of us wins, we all win. How many times how many times have many of us heard that in a corporal meeting? Oh my god. When I worked at a call center like 10 to 12 years ago, oh my god. The corporal meetings were the worst, and just like that's a story for another day. But oh my god, yeah. If one of us wins, we all win. Yeah, and going back to the father, when you're a little kid, you don't tell you can't tell right away that your parents are trying to help you. All they hear is a mean or strict tone, and they like they like curl inward, instead of just listening. If Faye wins, we all win. No, there we go. That's more like it. That's more like it. Yes. But yes, yeah. It's a board game to channels a strict father figure for you to overcome. Yeah, in a way, the game's also looking out for you. If the game holds the spirit of another father, yeah, that's typically the thing that you try to expect of fathers, right? At least stereotypically. Or where mothers raise and nurture, fathers are supposed to guide you. Oh, that's the board trying to fulfill its purpose in that way. And hydrate. All right, we'll hydrate.
And that is exactly what we see embodied in the Hunter Van Pelt.
Come back and face me like a man!
The reason lies in Alan's own imagination. The game brings the player's fears to life. Jumanji's purpose is to teach, to give its players experience and knowledge.
Yeah.
Like every game, it has a goal. And even though the board came to life under tragic circumstances, its core purpose has always been to bring a family together. I think it's time we moved on to the two most important questions. Can the board be destroyed? And is it possible to die while playing Jumanji? As we've
A big eternal problem, yeah. Or where parents and kids just fail to understand each other.
already mentioned, Caleb and Benjamin Sproul once tried to destroy the game, but failed. The reason is that the heart of Jumanji is the Nyamakora stone, an ancient artifact with magical power that contains the souls of people. That's why Jumanji can't be destroyed by any physical means. It would require magic. However, that doesn't mean the board is completely invulnerable. If the game is in progress, no matter what you do, the board won't even get a scratch. But once the game is over and the players have won, the board can in fact be destroyed.
Oh.
It can only be done in the same place and by the same means through which it was created. Jumanji was born in Africa, in fire. Therefore, the only way to truly destroy it is to burn it in a fire at the exact spot where the game first gained its magical power. The next important question is it possible to die while playing Jumanji? To find the answer,
Okay, that's good. That's a good rule to have. Oh yeah, Wolf. Yeah, that's also a very good point there. Yeah, there's a big generational divide. That also makes it hard to understand each other sometimes, isn't it? Yeah, you see it all the time in like especially when it comes to the subject of job searches, right? It's a common complaint. I've heard my friends complain about it. Just where your parents just don't quite get how hard the job market is, right? You try to tell them. Oh, I mean, the parents try to tell you, oh, just bring your resume, just walk right in with a firm handshake and say, I want to work here. It's like maybe that worked back in the day for your day, but nowadays you can't do that. If you try to walk into an establishment and say, hey, I want a job, they'll tell you, oh, you need to apply online, and they're certainly not gonna accept you brazenly walking in and saying, yo, give me a job, right? It doesn't work that way anymore, and sometimes it's hard to help each other understand it. Yeah, and the curse having a way to end it where it began. It's poetic and fitting. But yeah, on the subject of just generational gaps creating misunderstanding, a tale as old as time, right? It's like you always be telling the next generation, they just don't get it. I mean, even today myself, we see it with like millennials and Zoomers, right? You got millennials who have been raising their kids too softly, and now you have a generation of people who are afraid of everything. thing. And millennials will try to say, oh, it's because my parents were too strict on me. So, I made it easier on my kids. And that just creates even more misunderstandings. Yeah. Even tablets as far back as ancient Rome. Yeah, it's been a thing of humanity forever. That's just how humans are. For as brilliant as we can be just as deeply stupid. Humanity is the greatest paradox that ever existed.
We need to look at the history of the film's creation and the sequel that was planned but never made. The screenplay for Jumanji was written by Jonathan Hensley. The story was inspired by the 1981 children's picture book by Chris Van Allsburg. From the very start of working on the script, Hensley wanted to build the entire story around a set of defined rules. He wrote out the key laws of the game.
Oh, it used to be a storybook.
The first rule stated, only children can play. You might think of Alan and Sarah and say, but they were adults. It's important to remember that Alan and Sarah started the game as children, and in 1995, they were merely continuing what they had begun. That's why the adults in the story never believed Sarah. When she told people that the board had sucked Alan inside, she tried several times to prove she was telling the truth. Police officers and detectives even examined Jumanji and tried to play it themselves. But since they were adults, the game refused to show any of its magical powers. To an ordinary adult, Jumanji remained just a simple board game. That's exactly why psychiatrists tried to convince Sarah that Alan's disappearance was only a product of her imagination.
I wonder if that's the board's way of protecting itself too, or protecting a game in progress. Because if children play a game, they just play a game, right? It's typically adults who try to look into something much deeper. It makes sense that it would try to shut out adults from starting the game.
Alan, I have spent over 2,000 hours in therapy convincing myself that it doesn't exist. See what happened to you was so awful. I made up that
Sarah, it was awful. It was awful. It was awful.
The second rule, you cannot die while playing Jumanji. Yes, as strange as that may sound, Jumanji is first and foremost still a game. On the other hand, this rule also explains how Alan managed to survive in the jungle. A young, frightened boy, alone in the wild, without food, water, or any survival skills, wouldn't have lasted even a month. But according to Jumanji's own rules, he couldn't die. It also raises a logical question. How would Alan have been able to return to the real world if he had died there? What if one of the other players, say Peter, rolled a 5 or an 8 to bring Alan back? It wouldn't have worked if Alan were already dead. And you've probably
Okay. Well, that's a good safeguard in place to have. Yeah, these tidbits are pretty cool to learn. Yeah, I guess maybe they didn't include the full rules for time or things like that. Because sometimes when you make it a film, you gotta cut some stuff for time, even if it might seem important. Well, but benevolent in a way, right? I mean, you're still a kid trapped in the jungle, but hey, if you didn't die, right? It's like thanks board game, thank you. Yeah, you're right. Instead, we'll just carry a lifetime of trauma that will rebuild right into our renewed lives. That's better, right? What's a little bit of trauma? Just get over it. Walk it off, sport. Talk about tough love, right? Oh my gosh. Oh my.
probably noticed something else. The supposedly deadly mosquitoes weren't as lethal as the game described them to be.
Oh, no?
56 residents of the town of Brantford were attacked by the mosquitoes, but not a single person died. Yes, people suffered from fever, sickness, and other painful symptoms, but none of them lost their lives. The same goes for Judy after she was struck by the poisonous plant's thorns. Didn't Alan warn that she should have died immediately? Of course, we don't know exactly what happened to her, but it's clear she didn't die. Everyone who starts the game is protected. They cannot die while playing. This is one of the 4 main rules of Jumanji. The third rule deals with the consequences of cheating.
Okay, yeah, like that's also a bit of a curse in a way too. You're not gonna die from poison. You're just gonna slowly suffer its effects until the game's over. Don't worry, it's no big deal. Just walk it off. It's fine. Just a constant kind of feeling in your stomach.
Or breaking the rules of the game. Anyone who tries to cheat will be punished immediately. They will begin to gradually transform into the animal represented by their game piece. That's why Peter started turning into a monkey, because his token was a monkey. If he had played as the elephant, he would have started growing a trunk. For example, Alan's piece was the rhinoceros. If he had tried to cheat, he would have begun transforming into a rhino. In addition to that, any rule breaker is instantly sent back to their starting space and forced to restart their turn. This way, Jumanji not only eliminates any possibility of cheating, but also punishes the offender for trying. The fourth
You know what? That's pretty much a strict father thing to do, right? It's a father who made this game. Yeah, isn't that what fathers do to their sons? They'll just say, "Oh, walk it off. It's not a big deal. You're fine. Stop crying." Right? It's pretty mean, pretty rough. Sometimes you can't just walk it off. Sometimes you need support. Like, I get what you're trying to do, trying to teach them to be tough, self-sustaining, but the woman in me doesn't like that. I'm like, no, you gotta nurture them, soften them a bit. Sure, give them a harsh lesson now. You need a balance, man. That's what you need. You need a balance. No extreme coddling, no harshness. Find the middle ground, people. Find the middle ground. It's not that hard. Oh my goodness gravy.
Fourth rule: when a player's piece reaches the finish line, they must say just one word: Jumanji. At that moment, the game doesn't merely end. It rewinds time back to the very day it was first started. It's like a reset to the starting point, the moment of the first roll.
It's a song of
This
time.
means it doesn't matter who makes the final move. The outcome is always tied to the person who began the game. That's why Alan would have returned to his childhood no matter what, even if Judy or Peter had been the first to reach the finish. It was this rule that led to the film's ending being changed. Director Joe Johnston didn't like the idea of the children forgetting about the game entirely. In his original vision, Judy and Peter were supposed to receive a gift from Alan at the end, a box of sneakers called Jumanji. By saying the word out loud, the children would have remembered everything they had experienced. However, screenwriter Jonathan Hensley insisted on removing that scene. He explained that such a twist would violate the game's main law. Its rules cannot be bent or broken. In the end, the version we saw in the film was the one where Judy and Peter remember nothing about their time in Jumanji. Of course, there are a few more rules. Things like taking turns properly, rolling again if you get a double, and so on. All of these established laws of the game were part of the reason why, in 2015, Sony Pictures Entertainment cancelled a planned prequel to the original Jumanji and decided instead to completely rethink the concept of the franchise. As a result, we got Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. But what few people
Yeah, that film I haven't seen yet. I haven't seen the second one, Jumanji. I can understand why they changed the ending there. It's probably better that those kids don't remember, right? You already have two pairs of completely traumatized people. We don't need two more, right? It's better to let those kids, have a proper life. I'm pretty sure the soul remembers, right? Or the heart or something like that.
know is that at the very start of production, the studio had planned an actual prequel. There was even a draft script written that explored how the game was created, how it gained its magical powers, and how it eventually made its way to America. The entire story centered on the Sproul family, with Caleb and Benjamin ultimately managing to win this difficult battle. The movie would have ended by tying directly into the beginning of the 1995 film, essentially becoming a full-fledged prequel. However, before production began, the studio decided to send the draft to Jonathan Hensley for his feedback and approval. The screenwriter was deeply disappointed. He said it felt as though the future creators of the film hadn't even watched the original, because they broke several of the fundamental rules. For example, in the prequel, adults could hear the drums, and Robert and Michael were shown dying while playing Jumanji, among other mistakes. In the end, all of this led the studio to completely reboot the project, releasing the version where the board game is replaced by a video game console. But in truth, the story didn't end there. In 2021, a group of enthusiasts finally brought the prequel idea to life, creating a fan-made film called Jumanji: The First Game, a fan version of the original movie's backstory. Because of all this confusion, the true essence of Jumanji became heavily distorted, and the original vision of the story was lost. Still, director Joe Johnston left behind many fascinating details that can be noticed if you look closely. For example, the board itself was designed with a curious flaw. The different playing pieces require a different number of steps to reach the finish line.
That's because artists can't count. Artists are bad at math. The man's clearly an artistic genius. That doesn't mean he's good at math and counting. Yeah, exactly. I guess that's why the original guy had a problem with it. If only children could start the game. Yeah, it does make zero sense that the two random dudes who are also missionaries could just find and start the game. Yeah, I guess that does break the canon and the rules that the original writer set out.
The rhinoceros needs 31 moves to reach the Golden City, while the elephant needs 33. At first glance, it might look like a simple mistake, but as Johnston himself pointed out, it was intentional. The idea behind Jumanji was that it was originally created as a children's game. Its creators envisioned children playing together with their parents, so certain advantages were built in for the younger players. Their path to the finish was shorter, while the adults had to take a longer route. This imbalance in the board's design remained even after Jumanji gained its magical powers. In other words, even in 1995, the filmmakers already knew the brief backstory of the board itself because screenwriter Jonathan Hensley had carefully developed the foundation on which the main story of the movie was built. What can I say?
Okay, well, I guess in a way that makes sense too. Yeah, so a lesson I learned myself, you know, if you're playing with younger people, you go a bit easier on them. Yeah, so it makes sense that a parent would, parents, they'll take the longer pieces, so the kid has a better chance at winning. Makes sense.
Back then, they truly knew how to make a good film. It's been 30 years, and the movie still holds up surprisingly well. It's a real shame that the sequels chose to stray so far from the original idea, but perhaps some of you enjoyed all the Jumanji movies. I'll be waiting to hear your thoughts in the comments.
Ah, bravo. Bravo. That was a good one. Yeah, I think it's pretty insightful. Yeah. I never knew that Jumanji had such a backstory, but hearing all that, it does make a lot of the movie make sense in hindsight. Sure, it takes away a little bit of the menace, knowing that they're never gonna die the whole time, but you still feel tension in a different way. You know, you know that, but the characters don't know that. And it's important to immerse yourself into the minds of the characters, regardless of what you know. It's still terrifying whether or not you know if it's real or not, right? Another great video selection from Aleko here. This was a great film. A video. My god. Let me link y'all so y'all can watch it yourself here. Oh, oops. Oh, I did the V. Well, you know what I mean. Yeah, make sure you see the video yourself, give it a like yourself. I think it's a really great one. Absolutely wonderful.